Today, we will talk to you about our insight activation spectrum. But first, why is insight activation so important? Well, very recently, we did a study together with WFA, the World Federation of Advertisers, and we interviewed 14 global leaders in insights. And we asked them about their key priorities. And one of the top 3 priorities that they are working on within their teams, within their companies, is activating insights. Translating strong consumer insights, customer insights into business impact. And one of the quotes of one of the interviewees is summarizing it really well. We need to be as close to stakeholders as to customers and consumers. It's not only important that we find and create great insights, we also need to turn them into business impact. And therefore, we need to work together with stakeholders, know what they want, know what they need, and know how we can engage them. So that's why insight activation is so important. And before we introduce to you the activation spectrum, we would like to share first 5 proven truths about activation.
Yeah, as Tom mentioned, we are seeing more and more clients ask for activation. But that can be tricky because activation means different things in different situations. And sometimes it's hard to even imagine what are the possibilities of the space. So we've been working really hard to further define activation by talking about what it is and what it isn't. So Tom and I will take you through these 5 truths. The first one, activation is more than summarizing. To act, we need to move beyond synthesis and filter for the most critical messages so that we can form point of views and align on them and focus our efforts going forward.
The second truth is that the application is ever scalable for the level of influence and impact. What we mean with that is that depending on the project, the importance of the project, and the audience, we will use different activation techniques and we will go further in activation. Strategic projects will, of course, ask for more attention, and we will go deeper into the organization to translate the insights into business impact.
Number 3, activation marries research and implementation. So very often we tend to have one lens of a situation. We might have really great consumer research. We might have trends for what's happening in the industry or the category, or we have really good solutions for what we can put out into the marketplace for products or services. But the power is in marrying those 3 lenses together. That's when we start to form connections and themes, and then we can truly prioritize where we focus going forward.
And the fourth one is the fact that how we package our message and the efforts that we put in packaging our messages, that it matters. 4 different characteristics, I think, are important when we think about how we can package our message towards internal stakeholders and audiences. The first one is multiple touch points. We need to think like advertisers here. We need to tell our message more than once, multiple times preferably, and each time in a slightly different way. Secondly, it needs to be short and sharp. We're all living in a busy business environment, so we prefer snackable content. So multiple times the same message in a short and sharp way, and preferably also in a slightly different way or in a slightly different format. The third characteristic of impactful communication, impactful activation messages, is the fact that it should be an experience. It's not only about internal stakeholders listening or reading, it's also about being part of workshops, of co-creation sessions, taking part in experiences, being confronted with consumers and customers, stepping into their shoes. Very often we see that when they experience things, it will stick more with them. It will have more impact on them and their actions. And finally, if we want to do these three things, we need curated insights. We need to know very well which insights matter to whom at which particular moment. And of course, we need great insights around what different stakeholders have on their minds, what's on their plate, if we need to do that.
And a really exciting one is that when the momentum starts going, it is super contagious. When people get a taste of it, they want more and more. When we see the collaboration of cross-functional teams come together and bridge insights with strategy, that's when we start to deliver best in class on our consumer and customer needs. And that's when we're really authentic and we're building and doing things that everyone's really proud of. So it's really exciting. Now that we've talked about these 5 proven truths, we want to put a little bit more structure around it and get tactical, explaining the activation spectrum. So we've learned to think about the activation space as a spectrum. And as Tom mentioned earlier, it's defined by a lot of different things. It's defined, of course, by budget and timing sometimes, but it's also defined by the type of initiative. Is this something that is a no-brainer for the organization? Or is it something that's one of our big bets and we really need to make sure happens and happens well? It also could depend on the relationship between the stakeholders. Do we have a strong relationship? Do we collaborate well? Or are we still building trust and still learning how each other works together? All of these things, including the culture of the organization and the teams, become really important in deciding what type of solution we put forth in activation. There are 2 ends of the spectrum, and they're both anything along the spectrum is great. It's just a matter of what we're trying to do. On the left side of the spectrum, the activation tends to be more insights focused, and insights can be consumer, or can be market trend, can be just any kind of company insight. But the focus here is more around understanding and education. It's explaining and giving facts and data and information, and leaving it open to interpretation what the audience is going to do with it. On the other end of the spectrum is a more strategy focus. This is when we're filtering, we're starting to talk about how we use this information, and we're making commitments so that we're driving it further within the organization. It's much more focused with a point of view. If we take a step back and look at segmentations, everyone's working on segmentations right now. If we think about what a segmentation would look like in these 2 parts of the spectrum, if we're in the insights focus, that segmentation is much more about talking about what we did to create the segment, talking about who these segments are and really bringing them to life, and maybe talking about some next steps. And the strategy focus, if we're talking about a segmentation, it's probably linking this initiative to the company's vision and to what the company is trying to do. It's perhaps talking about it like a strategic framework and how it connects to other processes and other things that the company is doing. It's collaboratively coming up with use cases and maybe even walking through how you can implement it in your marketing plan, how we can evaluate existing ideas against this, how we can come up with new opportunities and prioritize growth spaces. So much more focus. So that's our spectrum. To define it even further, we've come up with 4 different C's that can help us talk about where we want to play along the spectrum as we're trying to define it. The first one is Captivate. This is about bringing those insights to life and sparking action. So think about things like videos, newsletters, really exciting and memorable ways to bring the knowledge to life so that people get excited by it. The next one is Craft. This is more where we're starting to take those multiple lenses and merge them together to tell a narrative and a point of view for how those insights can push forward into strategy. So think about things like executive influence, selling stories, playbooks. The third C is Commercialize. This is all about keeping that alive and implementing it into the organization. So this space, we're talking about how do we implement this into our business to business planning? How do we use this to align our teams on where we do want to focus in the future? How do we use this for idea generation and put that into play within the organization? Now, we are seeing over this last year since COVID, with more cross-functional teams and more collaboration and prioritization with the company, a little bit more happening in the craft and commercialized space. But of course, an initiative can be along any part of the spectrum or have any of those C's together. We also wanted to make sure to talk about a lot of times, clients want us to help them do this type of work, but sometimes they also want to grow those skills within their own teams. So we have a fourth pillar of Cultivate, where we help teach individuals or teach teams how to grow their own activation skills. And so we are going to now take you through all four of these with some examples. Tom, you're up first.
Yes, let's start with Captivate. So a couple of examples of what is possible to bring really insights to life. First of all, we can do video content, little mini documentaries. And the example you see on the screen is from a series of ethnographies we did. And to bring, let's say, that spirit to life of what consumers told us during those ethnographies, parts of the video content was mixed into little documentaries around each of the insights that were the results of the ethnographies. So internal stakeholders could really feel what consumers were telling us. They could hear firsthand what plays in the world of consumers and what the stories are actually behind the insights that we found. Second example is doing a little quiz. A little quiz actually right before your workshop or your presentation, before people, internal stakeholders, get to know the results. And we ask them 10 questions about what they are going to see, what they are going to learn. They need to anticipate the results of the study, if you want. They need to step into the shoes of consumers, use their empathy, and almost predict what consumers have told us. And this is, of course, in two ways interesting. First of all, we make sure that if people on a 10-question scale, that they score somewhere between a 4 and a 6, so that in one or the other way, they feel not completely uncomfortable about their knowledge, but they also feel like there is still a lot to learn. That's one thing. And then secondly, we also learn through this quiz what it is that the knowledge gaps are. So we can spend more time during the actual workshop or presentation on those specific aspects. So it's a confrontation of the audience with their lack to some extent of knowledge about the topic, and it helps the one leading the workshop to focus on the things that really matter. And then a last example is using Consumer Connects to really bring insights to life. It's a more active way than the videos, because stakeholders can really talk directly to consumers about the insights that they have seen during the presentation. And we recently did a project for a candy manufacturer, and we brought to life how consumers were thinking about certain topics in different countries. So it was interesting for the audience not only to learn about the stories behind the insights, but also to see how the insights play out differently in completely different markets. So these are just 3 examples of how you can bring insights to life, how you can inspire your audience, and how you can maybe be a little bit provocative. You trigger their attention, you spark their minds, and hopefully that triggers first potential actions. Other options that you have are infographics, newsletters, and so on. It's all about using creativity and different types of formats in media to bring those insights to life. and to bring them into the organization. Next is craft, Lisa.
So for craft, is again this space where we're starting to bridge insights with strategy, and there's a lots of different ways that can come to life. One of my favorite examples is rethinking how we do traditional research. So this was within the frozen category. We got a request to do a big custom A&U and understand what consumers want in this space. As we started to talk a little bit more, we realized that the team was really trying to go to a convenience retailer and show their thought leadership and come up with opportunity spaces so that they could link their solutions that they have, as well as do innovation together in spaces where they maybe don't yet have those answers. So that was great insight. And as we were designing the solution for this, we did an A&U, and we wanted to understand what the consumers are drinking and what they're thinking in this space. But we also went out and did some market secondary to understand what are the trends that are happening, what are some new in market examples, what is the competition doing, and trying to understand a little bit more of the space that isn't right in front of us. We were then able to take those two things and kind of validate some of those hypotheses in the quant, as well as build some themes and understand where the true opportunity spaces for this category. Instead of creating a traditional research report with lots of data to share that out, we wanted to help the team and actually build their presentation for this working session with their customer. So we got a simulator, you can play with that forever, look at lots of different scenarios. But this presentation that was created was for a multi-hour working session, and we made it really interactive. So it wasn't necessarily just about the consumer. It blended together the consumer, the market, and the solutions at hand, creating a story more about 4 opportunity areas and what we could do to influence and to be stronger than our competition in those spaces. As they were doing the presentation, there were, of course, discussion points, and the audience members got worksheets so that as they talked through each opportunity, they were able to make notes to themselves about, oh, I love this idea, or oh, maybe timing isn't right. And at the end of the session, they put that all up on the wall, and they came away with prioritizing which areas to partner on together going forward. So a great example of just rethinking how we would typically attack a problem. The next one I love too. We're all trying to think about the future world and what's going to be happening in the future space. And in this situation, we were trying to imagine the club of the future. So there was some amazing work done to immerse in the nightlife of about 150 clubbers over 10 countries. So trying to understand what that experience was like and what was happening and so forth. So we took that and we mapped an interactive journey. And along that journey, we could understand what were pain points, what were delighters, and come away with opportunity themes so that the team, the cross-functional team, could come together and prioritize where they want to focus next. So those are 2 great examples, but of course, there's lots of other ways that craft can come to life, whether it's embedded in an initiative that's currently happening with some small steps or something ad hoc altogether. We talked a little bit earlier about executive influence. A lot of time we get asked questions like, what do we know about this? Or are we doing anything about this topic? So we want to come to the table with that information and in a more actionable way than just education. Selling stories internally and externally are really important. Thought leadership, toolkits and playbooks are really popular right now in terms of trying to make sure that we are linking our solutions to the consumers and to the market, as well as making those short and concise so people can actually use them. That then takes us to commercialize. So again, this is the space where we're actually collaborating cross-functionally, and we're making commitments, and we're doing business planning, and we're implementing this knowledge into the system in more terms of strategy. So one of my favorite examples here is that we had one of those executive ask, hey team, what do we know about teams? And they were kind of convinced that maybe we didn't know a lot about teams, and everyone wants to know about teams right now. Well, it turns out this group knew a lot about teams and had been tracking them for years, right? And had lots of decks on it. So there wasn't a need to go out and get more information necessarily. It was more about how do we answer this question in the right way. So we curated a bunch of knowledge that the team had about teams and looked at some trends and updated that information. We also found that one of the brands had done a segmentation. And so we thought, wow, wouldn't it be cool if we could take this segmentation and level it up so all the brands could be using it? So there's a team segmentation, not necessarily a brand segmentation. So we did that, and we had working sessions with each of the brand teams to update them on the landscape of teams, but also introduce the team segments to them and have them brainstorm within their groups and make commitments for how they were going to incorporate what they learned and which segments in their existing marketing plans, how they work with their other segmentations that they're doing, and what plans they have to make sure they have strong efforts for teams going forward. We then took that and put that back into our executive communication and said, yes, we know about teams. And not only do we know about teams, we have plans across the brand to be actionable for teams. And we also identified a white space over here that none of us are looking at. So we probably need to look at some innovation. It was awesome. It went above and beyond the ask and was really exciting. The second example under Commercialize is we're seeing a lot more understanding that to make sure that our work lives on and that it is actually actionable and used, we have to think about a longer term communication plan. So we need to think about who are we talking to, think about stakeholder mapping, who are the different groups that we're talking to, what do they need to know about, how often, and in which way. And we start to think about it more as a commercialization or communication plan for the work that we're doing. So we have multiple touch points over time periods and making sure that we're giving new news, we're giving reminders, we're sharing success stories and talking about those things. And then there's just lots of other things that can come to life in this space. As we think about planning for the year, think about even aligning, as again, we have all these teams coming together with different priorities or maybe a slightly different spin on how we talk about something. Or even if we're trying to go to a customer with a suggested lineup, like we're not always aligned on what that is. So we're seeing a lot more in that space. And of course, just interactive discussions and sharing. So instead of presentations, it's more, working sessions and getting things done. So with that, Tom is now going to talk to us about Cultivate.
Yes, so Cultivate is all about how to train people in the business, internal stakeholders, to have the necessary skills to activate insights, but also how we work together with insights teams and the members of an insights department to make this happen. We have two types of trainings here. It can be off-the-shelf trainings, but it can also be bespoke work that we create specifically for one particular client. A couple of examples here. When we talk about training stakeholders, it could be around what is actually a customer or a consumer insight and how to translate a customer or a consumer insight into ideas, into concepts, both for innovation and communication. We have seen that when internal audiences understand actually what an insight is and what the beauty of an insight is, that they start to appreciate it more and that they understand way better what that can mean for their day-to-day jobs. And secondly, when we can involve internal crowds into crafting insights, into turning insights into ideas and into concept boards, when they know very well how that works, it becomes way easier to work together with them on those type of projects. So it's about giving internal audiences the knowledge and the skills to be actually our perfect audience for activating insights. That's the idea. And when we work with the members of an insight team, of an insight department, it's all about what are your challenges when it comes to working with internal audiences? What are your challenges when it comes to Captivate, Craft, and Commercialize? What are you struggling with? And we teach them some of our own tricks. We give them lots of tips on how to do that. And again, that means that we can work better together on those type of projects later on. But from time to time, we also create very bespoke trainings because a team is struggling with a very specific challenge that is not a common one, or we work together on big transformation projects that they need to land in the business. So Cultivate is all about upskilling both internal stakeholders and the members of inside teams to make activation actually happen together with us. And that can go all the way from training up to really coaching those teams and guiding them to the next milestone. So time for a quick overview. Let's go back to our activation spectrum and let's take a look at what a couple of things to remember are for each of the different C's. Let's start with Captivate. Captivate is all about bringing insights to life. It's about making those share outs, those presentations, those reports, those workshops more engaging and more impactful. It's about inspiring people and bringing in a fresh perspective. But it's also about adding a little bit of provocation so that they start to think differently about things, and that at least at the end of a presentation, at the end of a workshop, at the end of reading a report, or looking at one of those artifacts that we create, that it triggers first ideas in their heads. And then we have Craft. Craft is all about bridging insights and strategy. It's about rethinking our deliverables. How can we create deliverables that are bite-sized, that are easy to use when they are turning those insights into strategies, when they are linking those insights with the strategy of the business. So it's about marrying consumers, market, and business. That's the whole idea. And then thirdly, we have Commercialize. And Commercialize is about what's next. What are the concrete actions? What, based on what we have learned, are the priorities? It's about making it all very actionable, and it's about working together with teams to get to certain commitments. So you see, each time we go a little bit further in turning insights into actions, and we go a little bit deeper in the business, working together with different stakeholders to really turn that insight into business impact. And last but not least, we of course have Cultivate, which is all about empowering every single person in the business, both the internal stakeholders and the team members of an inside team, to make activation happen together with us. So this was our view on activating insights. This is our activation spectrum. We are looking forward to questions and give you a couple of seconds to type in your questions. And Lisa, of course, we want the audience also to share their feedback on the presentation itself, not only their questions. So if you want to take a minute to fill out a little short survey, and I promise you it's only 2 questions. It's really the shortest survey you have ever seen, but it gives us a little bit of feedback on how interesting this presentation was and what we can maybe do better in the future. And of course, after this presentation, if you have other questions or you have a specific challenge for us, of course, feel free to reach out to us. So let's see, are there any specific questions? Let's open the chat and see what questions we have from our audience.
I definitely saw a couple in there.
Yes.
One question was, who do we typically work with on activation in an organization? So I would say that there are lots of different teams that we work with. So we do a lot of work with insights, also marketing and innovation. A lot more lately with sales and thinking about how do we strengthen those external communications. And then we actually do a lot of conference presentations too, for executives when they're going to conference. I don't know, Tom, if you have anything to add to that.
No, apart from the fact that it's pretty broad, the audiences that we work with. It can be almost everyone. So in that sense, I think it's more about how do you tweak your approach to the audience that you speak to. I think if you, for example, thinking about activating or bringing an insight to life, the way you will do that for an innovation team might be different than when you talk to a communications department or when you need to bring an insight to life for the CEO of the company. It will be a completely different approach. So I think that's the thinking.
And I love what is really nice is that there's flexibility in how you apply activation. It doesn't have to be a huge thing. It can be, but it can also be a really small step that can be applied just to kind of elevate up that actionability. We had another question about, are there ways to incentivize or incite employees to act on this information? I know that I've seen lots of different ways. There's some, very specific ways where, for a segmentation, when you take out a job within an organization, you have to click which segmentation you're going to be focusing on. That's a very forced way of doing it, right? Or changing how people are rewarded and evaluated on their job performance in that space. Other ways that we find really effective is the collaboration. So when we are doing this type of project, often we have a core team that is working on it weekly with us as we're going through and curating information and creating whatever type of story or asset that we have. But we often have a larger group of stakeholders that we are involving along the way. So they're probably in the initial kickoff to make sure we're talking about what is in and out of scope. They're gut checking the work that we're doing. They're offering additional perspective and insights into it. And so because we're including that group, it's much more meaningful for them and they had a voice in it. So it's more relative, it makes sense. And they're very much in tune with wanting to deliver on these things because they've been involved in the process.
Yeah, and I would say the biggest incentive should be that you get enthusiastic as an internal stakeholder about what you have seen or the opportunity that is presented to you in the work we do. I think that hopefully should be the biggest incentive, that you get really enthusiastic and that you get energy from the potential opportunity. Another question I think that I saw was what's next in insight activation? Where is it going? What are specific trends? What are specific things that are trending or in high demand when we look at the whole space?
Mm-hmm. I would say that we are seeing more and more time being spent on teams coming together and like individually thinking about what are the priorities and what are the areas they want to focus on, and then coming together to talk about that and align. We're seeing so many more cross-functional teams being put together to solve really large company problems and or new innovation. And so we're seeing a lot more of that. There's a huge focus on prioritization and how do we do that for what makes sense specifically for the company and not necessarily just because the consumer wants it or because the market's going that way. We're seeing more in that space. I would say we're definitely seeing more in terms of shorter communications and more bite-sized, different types of audience-specific communications, and then lots more working sessions as opposed to presentation share-outs. It's more like, I don't have time to be in meetings all day. How do we make sure we get done what we need to get done within this session and come up with those next steps and everyone comes away with a commitment? Those are some of the things that I'm seeing, Tom. I don't know if you have more to.
I would like to add one. I think just connecting with real consumers, to touch and feel them almost, especially in a post-COVID kind of era that we're all living in. I think we see that that is something that is definitely trending, bringing insights to life by hearing real time, real life, the stories from real consumers. We have another question that just came in. Do you have good experience with an insights library to be used themselves by people in the business? And what are potential success factors of those type of platforms? I can maybe start with that one. I think it's difficult. Why is it difficult? Because first of all, in order to make it relevant, there needs to be a lot of insights and information on the platform before you launch it. So you almost need to go back in time and populate that platform with a lot of different insights. And I say insights and not reports, because if you create a library of reports, documents, it will be very hard to find what you're actually looking for as a non-expert. I once was visiting a client who was very proud on the fact that they had built such a library of documents. And then I asked, and who's actually using it? And the answer was, unfortunately, people within our team, because we know what we're actually looking for and where we can find it. So I think the comparison with the library is a really good one, but in this case you need a librarian to find what you're actually looking for. So that's definitely an issue. I think you need to do a lot of hard work for a lot of different reports to take out the meaningful observations, the insights, and to populate the platform upfront with a lot of those observations and insights. That are two challenges, I think, that make it hard. And it's about, of course, afterwards, once the platform is there, for every single project that you do, you need to do the work. So it needs to become a habit to constantly populate the platform. And then we have a fantastic platform, but then we also need to make sure that it becomes a habit for all the internal stakeholders, that when they have a question, they first think, hey, can we find something on the platform? Yes or no? So quite some challenges here to make it work. And I speak out of experience.
I would add to that, in addition to thinking about that library, thinking about how the team can really be true consultants in that space as well. So we saw some really good success with an insights team that had the library. They had over 70 different sales marketing people that they were servicing from their insights team. And so they actually prioritized them. Here's the ones that we're going to help you build custom information, custom stories. And then for everyone else, we have the library, but we also are going to spend time talking about what are the 5 most important topics we think are going to come up this year. And then they set aside time to build and curate and understand stories for that space, and build those communications so they could be customized by whoever was going to share that out, with speaker notes, with other kind of materials that they could be trading in and out. So that allowed them to have the best of both worlds, where they had a great library and people could go. They were giving really custom service to the ones that were more of a priority for the business. And then they also had some kind of off-the-shelf customization availability as well.
More questions came in. The next one is, what are some forms of resistance that we have seen when moving into this direction? What can be things, what are our tips and tricks when you are a leader, an insights leader, and you want to push your organization into this direction? What to do, what not to do, what are the watch outs?
I think we could spend a whole session on that, but I think what at least I see as being the biggest challenge is that it takes work, right? It takes work to push ourselves and our skill sets and our comfort from one space to another. And it requires us to learn new ways of thinking about things. It requires us to be more iterative and talk about possibilities and not just have the answer every single time. So for example, I keep bringing up segmentation, but we were working on a segmentation communication, and we really wanted to push into use cases, but the team was like, well, we don't use it. We don't know how, we don't want to go there. Well, cool. Like, we need to have conversations with the users then and work with them to create that content and make that story stronger. But sometimes that's uncomfortable. So those are some things that I think are hard. But there's so much intertwined now that for us to continue to be thought leaders, for us to continue to add value with every interaction, we'll have to keep pushing ourselves in these ways. And we don't have to be perfect. We just have to make small steps.
Yeah, and I think you touch upon a very important point. It's additional work you have to put in, both as an insights professional within an organization, as the user of those insights, because you will need to participate as well. And I think it's about convincing people that the work they put in, that there will be a return on investment of that additional effort later on in the process, that everything will be much more impactful, that things will go a lot smoother than before. I think that's one of the things you need to convince people of. And what I have also seen within insights teams is, can we do this? Because there is a certain fear, like, yes, this probably would be a great way to do things, but can we do this? Do we have the time for this? Do we have the necessary skills for this? And that's why we created, amongst the others, our training offer to help to coach teams in making this happen.
And real quick, just onto that too. I think the other thing is, we talk about empathy so much, for empathy with our consumers and what they need and what they want. What we need to remember too is empathy with our coworkers and with our customers that we're going to sell into. Sometimes it's really easy. We have our talk track and what we want to do, but we need to think about what's important to them and how they best work or how their culture works, and really implement based on that, as opposed to just kind of what we want to get done.
Yeah, absolutely. And there's a final question. It's a difficult one. What's our most effective tool to bring insights to life? What's our killer tool, if you want? I think that's a hard one. The question is there one that is always most effective? I think to me, it depends on what is the type of insights that you want to bring to life, who's your audience, what's your goal. I think it also depends if it's, for example, an insight around something that most people in the business will not agree with, or they have different assumptions. You need to opt for a certain form of confrontation. They need to be confronted with the fact that their thinking is going into the wrong direction. So you will have to do something that is more active, I guess. So it depends on what type of insights, how the organization is thinking about the matter and the subject, but also what type of audience you have in front of you, where they are in the organization, what their level of understanding is. So I think there is no one tool that always works. I don't know what you think, Lisa.
I totally agree. I will say one of my favorite influential, call it a tool, call it a packaging, is when you're trying to go in and convince something of something different, is using myth and fact. So you talk about, here's the myth, and then you turn around and say, here's the fact, and here's what we're up against. We've used that multiple times, super, super effective. And people kind of get caught in there like, ooh, that is what I thought, and I'm readjusting. The other, I think, just thing is, like, you have to have a point of view. And a point of view can come across in different ways. A point of view can come across as thought starters. A point of view can come across in terms of, here's what happens if we do nothing. Here's what happens if we do X. Here's what happens if we really go after it. And like kind of putting scenarios out there. That's another way to do it. There's lots of ways to have a point of view, but like you have to have a point of view so that people will listen. And then have the conversation. And it doesn't always have to be right. It can be just open for conversation.
Great. I think that were the questions. So thank you, everyone, for joining us today. And we hope that we triggered at least some enthusiasm around the field of activating customer and consumer insights. And like we've mentioned, we are up for more questions. So if you have additional questions, just drop us an email and we will get back to you. So for now, thank you for listening and see you maybe around another time. Thank you. Bye-bye.